Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tianlu. Coming up in this edition. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that he will not run in the upcoming party leadership vote in September, paving the way for a new Prime Minister. The Russian border region of Belgorod has declared a state of emergency after new attacks by Ukrainian forces. And voters in Kiribati are heading to the polls to determine the political fate of the Pacific nation. They will select members of parliament in the first of two rounds of a general election. We begin in Asia. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has said he will not seek re-election. He has rejected seeking another term as president of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, meaning the nation will see a new prime minister in the fall. Kishida told the media that his decision is the first step of reforms and changes for the ruling party. Terence Terashima reports from Yokohama.
It was a surprise from the Japanese public, of course. It was inevitable because the LDP support rate has been hovering around 20% range for such a long time. And LDP and Kishida had so many scandals, including the Church of Unification, which led to the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the scandal over the political funding, as well as Kishida's his own son holding a party inside the cabinet office. There was growing voices within the LDP that the current government will not be able to win the next House election if Kishida stays. Many of the analysts said it was inevitable, it was just the timing of it.
That was Terence Terashima on Fumio Kishida's decision to step down as the Japanese Prime Minister. In Europe, the Russian border region of Belgorod has declared a state of emergency after new attacks by Ukrainian forces. The Belgorod governor described the situation as extremely difficult. Both sides have brought in more troops. Ukrainian forces took the Russian army by surprise and gained control of multiple small settlements. Russia claimed its forces have halted Ukraine's advance. Alasha Milenkovic has more.
The fog of war is thick in this area. Claims and counterclaims are difficult to independently confirm, but the scale of devastation and human suffering is clear. Tens of thousands of civilians have evacuated from both the Kursk and Belgorod regions.
We left the chickens at home. We gave them 2 bags of grain and some water and left. Maybe there will be nothing to return to.
The Ukrainian side claims that after this attack it controls over 70 settlements in Russia, while the Russians say that number is under 30 and that they are inflicting heavy casualties on the invading forces. And here is a Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman with his take on these raids.
It should be emphasized that the operation in the Kursk region helps the front line because it does not allow Russia to transfer additional units to the Donetsk region, which complicates its military logistics.
The Russian army has reportedly repelled the Ukrainian attacks with heavy weaponry, bombers and soldiers.
That was Alasha Milenkovic reporting on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Then in the United States, former President Donald Trump has attacked Kamala Harris in a freewheeling live stream with Elon Musk over issues including crime and immigration. The interview comes as both candidates prepare to make major policy speeches on the economy. The Democratic team slammed Trump as extreme and dangerous. Meanwhile, the FBI is looking into hacks targeting the Trump and Harris campaigns. Jim Spellman has more details.
Hoping to regain his footing in the campaign for the presidency, Donald Trump agreed to a no-holds-barred interview on X.com, formerly Twitter, conducted by the platform's owner Elon Musk. The discussion got off to a rocky start with technical difficulties delaying the interview by about 40 minutes. Without presenting proof, Musk blamed hackers for the technical problems. When they got the live audio stream working, Trump criticized Kamala Harris on crime, immigration, and the economy, while accusing Democrats of staging a coup by having Harris take over the top of the ticket after Joe Biden dropped out. The Harris campaign mocked the technical difficulties of the live stream and called Trump extreme and dangerous. Trump's next rally is Wednesday in North Carolina, where he will focus on the economy, an issue where he is generally seen as having an advantage. And now the Harris campaign has added an event Friday in the same state, where she is also expected to focus on the economy.
Number one, she's going to talk a lot about price gouging, how she's going to take on big corporate interests to make sure that she's putting consumers first. And look, she's very proud of her economic agenda with President Biden. Over 15.5 million jobs and counting created, 4 major economic bills passed. Vice President Harris was very much part of that strategy in getting that legislation passed with President Biden. But she's also going to talk about her own economic agenda, how she's going to continue to reduce costs for American families.
As the candidates duke it out, the FBI is investigating hacks targeting the Trump and Harris campaigns. 3 Harris staffers have reportedly received fraudulent emails aimed at gaining access to campaign accounts. Those attempts were apparently unsuccessful. The Trump campaign says hackers successfully gained access to some of its internal documents, and at least 2 media outlets have been approached with material from the alleged hack. But so far, no outlets have published any of the material. The Democrats will hold their convention in Chicago next week. President Joe Biden slated to speak on Monday, followed by former Presidents Barack Obama on Tuesday and Bill Clinton on Wednesday, before Kamala Harris officially accepts her party's nomination on Thursday. It's not clear if Donald Trump will schedule events that week to try to take attention away from the Democrats.
That was Jim Spellman on the run-up to the U.S. presidential election later this year. Turning to Oceania, voters in Kiribati are voting to determine the political fate of the Pacific nation. They are electing members of parliament in the first of 2 rounds of a general election to be followed by a presidential contest in roughly a month. The new parliament will nominate no more than 4 presidential candidates among its members. Incumbent President Taniti Maumo, who's been in office since 2016, is vying to secure a 3rd and final term. Greg Navarro has more.
The tiny Pacific island nation of Kiribati is in the midst of its first round of voting. 114 people are vying for a seat in Kiribati's parliament. Now, this will take place over 2 rounds of voting to determine that. Then each party will put forward its candidate for president. That will likely include Taniti Maumo, the current president. He served in that role for the last 8 years. In fact, he's responsible for work to deepen ties with China. Now, there are 18 women vying for a seat in parliament this time. That's more than double for the previous election. In fact, experts say this particular election really comes down to what people think the current government has done as far as its job of governing this country and is doing at the moment as well. Now, Kiribati, it's home to about 120,000 people, and it is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to the impacts from climate change. That includes, in particular, rising sea level. It is an ever-present threat, and that is certainly a very big issue for people heading into the polls. Some of the other issues as well in this election, the rising cost of living, something we're facing just about everywhere in the world. Unemployment there, as well as concern over the government's ability to be able to essentially pay its bills. It has been struggling financially as well. Now, this election is being watched closely, not only across the Pacific, but also across the world, watching what happens with the results of this election. The second round will take place on August 19th. The results from that round are expected the following day.
That was Greg Navarro on the elections in Kiribati. Finally, in the Middle East, Israeli forces have stepped up attacks on Han Yunis in Gaza. A UN Relief and Human Development Agency warned that nearly 84% of the Strip is under evacuation orders from the Israeli army. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees said displaced individuals are seeking refuge in the agency's shelters, staying with relatives, or setting up tents in streets and schools. Akram Al-Satari has the latest.
At least 20 Palestinians have been killed during the day. 88 others were injured. The bombardment of different residential blocks in Khan Yunis area are still continuous. The Israeli army is advancing into East Khan Yunis area. East Khan Yunis area in Bani Suhaila is the place where the 2 rockets flew towards Tel Aviv area. And according to the statement that was made by Hamas military wing, they have launched them right from the area where the Israeli forces were active and were operating in that area. And this is signaling the fact that they still have control over the rocket launchers. They still have control over the situation in that area, and that they're still able to orchestrate some attacks, including attacking the armored vehicles that are operating in that area. But in the meantime, the military operations are still continuous in East Khan Yunis. The military operations are still continuous in central Gaza, where around 13 people were killed in different incidents throughout the day. The bombardment is still continuous in Rafah, and also retrieval of the bodies that were left and decomposed in the streets of Tel Sultan area in Rafah and in the very north of Rafah area is still continuous.
That was Akram al-Satari reporting from Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel has released a statement saying it will attend Thursday's ceasefire talks, but Hamas said it will not join the discussions. Now recapping today's headlines. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that he will not run in the upcoming party leadership vote in September, paving the way for a new Prime Minister. The Russian border region of Belgorod has declared a state of emergency after new attacks by Ukrainian forces. And voters in Kiribati are heading to the polls to determine the political fate of the Pacific nation. They will select members of parliament in the first of 2 rounds of a general election. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tianlu. Thank you for listening.